Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. Appearing now or soon on a peach or nectarine tree near you, peach leaf curl. What is this fungus that causes the leaves on these trees to redden, pucker, and curl? And how can you control it? Please note, I did not say eradicate. America's favorite retired college horticultural professor, Debbie Flower, has some tips for us. Also, we're going to go back about 8 years for an interview with Marta McDowell. She's the author of the book, All the President's Gardens. It's a look at the White House gardens through the centuries. And which president was the most active gardener while living in the White House? If you know that answer off the top of your head, you need to get on Jeopardy as soon as possible. It's all in episode 325 of today's Garden Basics with Farmer Fred, peach leaf curl control tips, and All the President's Gardens. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban Purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots. Let's go. Well, it's that time of year when you're staring up at your peach or nectarine tree and the leaves look kind of funny. You might see some reddish areas developing on the leaves. They might be getting thick and puckered, and then the leaves start to curl. I can guess you know what I'm talking about. It's peach leaf curl. It's a fungal disease. And is it going to ruin your tree? Is it going to ruin that crop? That's today's topic. Debbie Flower is here, America's favorite retired college horticultural professor. And from where I'm sitting here in the Abutilon jungle, I am staring at a donut peach tree that is rife with peach leaf curl. You can't see it behind the Abutilon from where you're sitting.
No, I can't. You're right.
But it is very saturated with it. And for that, I thank the winter rains and the late winter rains and the early spring rains that have basically been spreading the spores around.
Yeah, it's been a wet spring here in California. I'll take it because we need the water. But yes, it's those are the conditions that allow this fungal disease to stick around and infect your fruit tree.
It infects young green twigs and shoots. The shoots will become thickened, stunted, distorted. They often die. You might see some wrinkling or distortion on the fruit that develops. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Right.
But anybody who's grown peach or nectarines over the years is probably over the panic stage when it happens, if they still have the tree.
Yeah, it happens. And if you do nothing, which is really, well, it's not the only thing you can do right now, but if you do nothing, those leaves that are badly damaged will fall off and a new set will appear.
Do you need to fertilize the tree again for that?
It would be nice to give it some nutrition, yes, because it has just lost its whole set of leaves that it took some energy to put out there. I wouldn't do it until weather had sort of dried out, though.
Depending upon what part of the country you live in, you may not even see the symptoms until after the leaves emerge. You're not going to see much on the bud. You'd have to have pretty good eyes to be able to spot that. But when the leaves emerge on your peach or nectarine trees, then you might start seeing it. And what a lot of people want to do is clip those leaves off. And that's probably one of the worst things you could do because those leaves still have green portions that can photosynthesize.
Yes, they do. And the plant needs that. The plant needs something to photosynthesize. However, what falls to the ground can be raked up and gotten rid of, not composted, but put in here it would be a green waste can. Perhaps a new layer of mulch put down once all of those infected leaves have fallen off so that any fungal spores that are below the tree in that mulch will not splash back up into the tree with irrigation water or rain.
Yeah, that cleanup goes a long way to helping solve the problem as opposed to trying to clip everything.
Right.
But then again, you come back to a lot of people will say, okay, what can I spray to stop this from happening? Well, once you've got it, you've got it, and you're not going to cure it that year. You're not going to get rid of it that year. If you want to take action and do something preventative, you need to do that in the fall and winter.
Right. You need to do your preventative sprays. And there are fungicides labeled for use on peach leaf curl. You want to spray the plant twice, Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day for sure, or approximately Valentine's Day. And you do what's called spray to drip to run off. So the plant is dripping, and you've gotten the trunk, you've gotten the underside of the branches, you've gotten the top sides of the branches, you've gotten all parts of the plant. The spores of this fungal disease are stuck on the plant, under the bark, in all kinds of different places, and you want the fungicide to get to them.
In the good old days, you might spray with a really heavy-duty copper application that might be like 49% copper.
Right. You can't get that anymore.
No, it's more like 7 or 8%. Mm-hmm. And I guess you could use a sticker spreader with it, too. Right. But you can't use it after your buds have developed what is called the popcorn stage.
Right. So if that's when the flowers are first coming out, and they tend to be before the leaves on the stone fruit. So the bud is starting to open, and you see bits of white or light color like a kernel of popcorn.
And it's so important to clean up, like you mentioned, but unless you have a really hot compost pile, I wouldn't save it or move it.
No, I wouldn't take that chance. There are peach trees, cultivars, that are resistant to peach leaf curl. Resistance does not mean they will never get it. They're less likely to get it, but it doesn't mean they won't. And so spraying them is a possibility too, or you can wait until the first year you get it, then you know it's a problem, and start spraying the Thanksgiving after that.
Way back when, the University of California had several sprays that they would recommend about this. Currently, it's a copper spray with a 1% horticultural spray oil added to the mix that you would be spraying. There's even debate about when to apply the copper spray. Generally speaking, if you only do one spray a year, you want to do that around Valentine's Day.
Right.
Before that bud fully opens. But around Thanksgiving and Christmas, also pretty good times. The trick, though, is you need 6 dry days afterwards.
And that's a lot of time, yeah.
Yeah, especially in that time of the year. It's have dry weather like that. They used to recommend copper sprays. They used to recommend lime sulfur. They used to recommend Bordeaux mixtures. But lime sulfur and Bordeaux mixtures no longer available. And potentially caustic, too, especially the Bordeaux mixture.
And discoloring. They can discolor certain surfaces.
Right. There are a lot of warnings with that. You might be thinking, okay, so I can't get that 50% copper anymore, and the weakened ones don't work as well. Well, you don't want to use that Bordeaux mixture, that hydrated lime, because like you say, it can do a lot of discoloration. And they're not as effective as the mixture made from individual components, according to UCIPM. But there is a synthetic fungicide, chlorothalonil. It's the only non-copper fungicide available for managing peach leaf curl in the backyard orchard. And even though one fall application may help prevent a spring outbreak of peach leaf curl, a second application around Valentine's Day, again, before the buds or as the buds begin to swell, can be beneficial as well. However, you won't ever hear me tell you to go thee to the store and buy chlorothalonil. It is toxic to aquatic invertebrates and wildlife. You don't want to apply directly to areas where surface water is present or to intertidal areas. Drift and runoff from treated areas may be hazardous to aquatic organisms in neighboring areas. You know, like those friendly little frogs that croak during late winter. And also, if you read and follow all label directions, you should. On chlorothalonil, it says things like may be fatal if inhaled, harmful if swallowed or absorbed through skin, causes moderate eye irritation, avoid contact with eyes, skin, or clothing. Wait a minute, if you can't touch your skin and you can't touch clothing, what can it touch? I don't know.
A Tyvek suit.
There you go.
I mean, you do see people applying pesticides wearing a Tyvek suit, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Did you know you're in Barking Dog Studios?
I just figured that out.
Okay, yeah, of course. And you don't want to breathe the spray mist either. And also, here in the state of California, you will see this. A warning on the side that says this product contains chlorothalonil, which is a chemical known to the state of California to cause cancer. So, I don't like that idea. of using something that dangerous.
So what are you going to do with your peach tree?
I'm going to clean up the fallen leaves.
Mm-hmm. Sanitation.
I'll give it another dose of fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
I am not going to clip off the leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And I will have a reduced amount of fruit this year.
Right.
Because the tree is going to spend a lot of energy pumping out a new set of leaves. And that's going to adversely affect the fruit size and fruit production. But there is small fruit on there.
Yeah.
And chances are some of it just may fall off.
Right.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised. But it sure is a darn tasty peach, and it's certainly darn tasty than the allegedly peach curl resistant varieties like Frost, Indian Free, Q18, and Muir. Although I've heard people say nice things about Q18.
Have they? Because I had Frost and I cut it down.
Yeah. They used to have a one they don't even sell anymore called California Curl Free.
Ah.
Oh, it got it in the second year, the peach leaf curl.
Oh, my.
So it's like,
curl free for a year.
Yeah.
They didn't tell you the whole name.
Right. So anyway, deal with it. But benign neglect isn't a bad way to go.
Just keep the tree healthy so that when it goes through these cycles, it has enough resources stored in its trunk and roots, etc., to recover from it. And don't expect a huge harvest on the years that you're having a peach leaf curl attack.
And it really spreads in those years where you do get a lot of rain at the wrong time of the year. Mm-hmm. And so when you get all that rain, there isn't much you can do. They even did experiments out at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center where they covered it with frost cloth after they sprayed. And it helped a little bit, but it was too much effort.
That was a big display this year, was the peach leaf curl infested tree.
Yes. Well, over the years, they've been dealing with it because everybody gets peach leaf curl. So you just deal with it. Don't clip off the leaves that are on there because the parts that are healthy are photosynthesizing and helping the tree recover. However, having said that, I think it's a good idea that before you spray with a copper spray, if you do use a copper spray in late fall, early winter, is to prune the tree.
Yes, I was going to say something about that. Pruning fruit trees to keep them more open so you get better airflow. Fungus and bacteria need 6 to 8 hours of free water, which means a droplet of water sitting on the plant in order for them to germinate and infect the plant. If the plant is very twiggy, then wind will be less effective at drying out any water spots that are on the plant. If you can get it open and get more airflow through it, and think about what's around it. Is it sited correctly to get good airflow through the plant? Or is it up against the house or up against a very tall fence or near another plant that is stopping the wind? Obviously, that would be something to think about before you plant the tree. But if you can correct it once the plant's in the ground, that may help keep down the amount of peach leaf curl that you get. However, once you got it, you got it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could maybe put up a temporary framework around the tree. And then when rain is predicted, especially as the buds open, drape the tree and protect it.
That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work, exactly. And then take it off so it gets some sunshine.
Yeah.
It's
a lot. You better have it pruned to be a very small tree.
Well, that's why we always talk about backyard orchard culture on the show, of keeping your fruit trees at maybe 7 feet tall to keep everything in reach. And that includes, makes spraying a heck of a lot easier, too, if you do spray.
Yes.
Like I say, I am reluctant to heave-ho the tree just because it does have tasty peaches on it.
Right. And at least for us, this is one of our wetter years. We've had 2 in a row now, which is pretty amazing. But we have springs where we get very, very little rain. And peach leaf curl is not a problem if there's not rain or overhead irrigation. Don't overhead irrigate.
And the University of California is very reassuring. They keep saying, although symptoms of leaf curl are seen primarily in spring as new leaves develop, there's little you can do to control the disease at this time. And they also say don't remove those diseased leaves or prune the infected shoots because that has not been shown to improve control. Those leaves are going to fall off and be replaced by new healthy leaves unless it's raining. Yeah. Consider thinning fruit later in the season. Okay. Prune in fall prior to applying any fungicides can reduce spore numbers overwintering on the tree and reduce the amount of fungicide needed. And if leaf curl symptoms occur on your trees in spring, Be sure to treat the following fall and winter to prevent more serious losses the following year.
Right. And when you do that pruning, don't put your branches in your compost pile or chip them and leave them as mulch in your yard, because then you're retaining, or possibly, no research has shown that fungal diseases are retained in chipped wood, but I would want to get it off my property.
We have debated out at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center about if you have mulch beneath a peach or a nectarine tree that gets peach leaf curl, what do you do with all that mulch? Mm-hmm. And there are those who say, well, just move it to a plant around a plant that isn't susceptible to peach leaf curl.
Well, the research done at Washington State says that these fungal and bacterial pathogens don't live on mulch because the mulch is not the same as living on the plant.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's about as good as it gets in terms of an explanation. I don't know if I'd move the mulch. I think I'd just put another layer on top of it.
Yeah, that would work.
All I'm trying to do is prevent those spores, if they are there and viable, meaning have life, from splashing back up in the tree. So if I put a layer, it doesn't have to be thick. If I put a layer of something else over it where the water first hits, that's when it's most powerful. Then I'm preventing that from happening.
Mulch, mulch, mulch. Where have I heard that before? But it works.
It does work.
Yeah, and plus you're feeding the soil as well as it breaks down. So it does a world of good for a lot of reasons, as you know, if you listen to this program. Peach leaf curl, we can't solve it for you, but we can maybe make it more tolerable for you.
Don't give up.
Yep. Enjoy those peaches. They might be fewer and smaller, but they'll still be tasty.
Yes, they will.
Thank you, Debbie.
You're welcome, Fred.
You've heard me talk about the benefits of Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric containers. Smart Pots are sold around the world. They're proudly made 100% right here in the USA. Smart Pots is the oldest and still the best of all the fabric plant containers that you might find. Many of these imitators are selling cheaply made fabric pots that fall apart quickly, but not Smart Pots. There are satisfied Smart Pot owners who have been using the same Smart Pots for over a decade, actually approaching 20 years. When you choose Smart Pot fabric containers, you know you'll be having a superior growing experience with the best product on the market. And your plants will appreciate Smart Pots too. Because of the 1 million microscopic holes in Smart Pots, your soil will have better drainage and the roots will be healthier. Those roots won't be going round and round on the outside of the soil ball like you see in so many plastic pots. The air pruning qualities of Smart Pots creates more branching of the roots, and that'll fill more of the usable soil in the Smart Pot. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pots lightweight, colorful fabric containers. And don't forget that /Fred part, because on that page are details of discounts when you buy Smart Pots at Amazon. Maybe you want to see them before you buy? Not a problem. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers as well as select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. To find a store near you or to buy online, visit smartpots.com/Fred. Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric planter. Go to smartpots.com/Fred for more information and that special Farmer Fred discount. Go to smartpots.com/Fred. I've been going through my garden files of old interviews lately, and I came across one that, even though this is about 8 years old, it really strikes home today. It was an interview with the author of the book All the President's Gardens by Marta McDowell. Let's give it a listen. It had me by its very first sentence, and the first sentence is this: all politics is local, as the saying goes, and so by necessity is gardening. All gardening is local. Where have I heard that before? Well, it's in the new book, All the President's Gardens, Madison's Cabbages to Kennedy's Roses, How the White House Grounds Have Grown with America. We're talking with the author of the book, Marta McDowell. And Marta, it's a fabulous book. It's well illustrated and plenty of human interest stories as well. And since your first sentence says all gardening is local, I have to ask, why the heck did they ever choose to situate Washington, D.C. on a swamp?
Oh, well, I guess that was available, Fred. It probably wasn't the best farmland. And it was really convenient. It had good access from water with the Potomac, and it was really close to George Washington.
Yeah, that was the thing. It's like 15 miles from his residence, and I could see why he was for it. But what I found interesting was the story you have in the book of Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton basically spending a drunken night together and deciding that Washington, D.C. would be located where it is.
Well, Hamilton really wanted a central bank, and so they made a deal. And Hamilton got his bank. He took on all the state's debts, and the Virginians got the Potomac location for the federal city. As the playwright, Lin-Manuel Miranda said, Hamilton, no one was in the room when it happened. No one else was there, so we don't really know, but that's the way it turned out.
Now, what is interesting about the people who have lived in the White House, they're basically renters, and yet they have free reign as far as what they can do with the property. They can add and subtract as they please. Now, Washington, it was his baby. It was his design. He was a farmer. And how did he lay out the grounds?
Well, he had an architect, Peter L'Enfant, but Washington decided that he wanted the house sited up on the hill where it would have a beautiful view of the river, and certainly it would be able to be seen there. It's a lot like Mount Vernon in that regard. And so he's the one who put it up there, and it is up a little rise, so it looks down onto these really big grounds. And, of course, at the time, it was fairly wooded, and then there was also pasture land there as well.
Washington also had an interest in citrus trees, didn't he?
Oh, yes. Washington actually had an interest in all sorts of trees, and he ordered lots of them. We think he was sort of trying them out for planting around the president's house and around Washington, but it planted, lots of native trees, but not just from around Virginia, all the way up and down the eastern seaboard. And
like a lot of us, he was very fond of going to nurseries, wasn't he?
Oh, yes. We think of him always, out being a soldier or then being a politician, but he took time to go to nurseries, both in Philadelphia and on Long Island. He corresponded with lots of people, got seeds, plants, just loved to plant anything.
He had some sense about him, though, even though he was bringing in some plants that he knew were not native to the Washington, D.C. area. He made accommodations for them. Like, didn't he build a big glass house for the citrus trees?
Oh, yes, absolutely. He had, the equivalent of an orangery, the brick and glass, where he could have things that were tender. So he definitely, knew a lot about growing things, and wasn't shy about taking a chance on something he wasn't sure about.
And he probably got good advice too.
Oh, no doubt.
But when you're president of the United States, you can pretty well decide for yourself what you want to go on the grounds. You have the story in there of Teddy Roosevelt and Richard Nixon both deciding to plant coast redwoods from California at the White House, and both times they died.
Yes, well, you can imagine, Teddy Roosevelt was so involved in the national parks and in, the preservation of land. And, he loved the West. So he tried a giant redwood. And then, of course, Richard Nixon, being from California, he wanted one as well. But, there are just some things that you can't legislate or be the executive of. And where trees want to grow is one of them.
Among the presidents, who were the most active gardeners?
Well, let's see. So I really expected Thomas Jefferson to be one of the ones out there, really digging in the gardens at the president's house. And it turned out that wasn't true. He was, it was a little too soon. It was still really under construction. James Madison certainly planted a lot, but the one that I was really surprised about is John Quincy Adams, because he got out there and dug in. He kind of learned to garden while he was president. The head gardener at the time, John Ousley, really taught him how to garden. Quincy Adams mentions in his diaries that called John Ousley his nomenclator, meaning that the person who taught him all of the botanical names for plants. He'd pick up acorns or walnuts or hickory nuts and then bring them outside to the garden at the White House and plant them. He planted apple seeds, and he actually kept propagation records. So going through his diaries, I found these wonderful entries, some of which had little drawings of these seedlings and the dates when he planted them and when they came up. And it was really wonderful.
Yeah, I was amazed at the notes that a lot of the presidents took that you have illustrations of, including one Thomas Jefferson had of when vegetables were in season and available at the local market.
Yes, and I was astounded not just at the, completeness and neatness of this table that he did by hand, but also the number of vegetables that were available to him in the Washington markets, through the year, much more than I would have expected at the time, right? This is the first decade of the 1800s. So they really had a lot of people growing a variety of vegetables.
Another president who surprised me, he gets short shrift in elementary school history classes, but I think he did a lot to promote the gardens at the White House, was Rutherford B. Hayes.
Ah, yes. So now I remember Rutherford B. rhymes with tree because he loved tree planting, both at his home in Ohio and then when he came to Washington, he really got that process of commemorative tree planting going. The other thing about the Hayes, so Rutherford Hayes and his wife Lucy Webb Hayes were temperance supporters. And they cut out all alcohol at the White House, which, as you might imagine, wasn't entirely popular with the Washington crowd. There was one gentleman, I think he was the Secretary of State, and he said something like, of one of their parties, it was a brilliant affair. The water flowed like champagne. So instead, the Hayes would take the guests through the glass houses. There were all of these conservatories attached to the west side of the White House at the time, and they even extended them, during their administration.
And then Teddy Roosevelt came around and tore them down.
Yes. Well, Teddy Roosevelt had a big family, lots of children. He was, I think, the youngest president ever inaugurated. He has a big family, and, the West Wing didn't exist then. So the president was expected to live and work in the accommodations of the House. And TR decided, no, he needed more space. So he called in an architect, and, they decided the conservatories have to go. And so all of the plants were moved out to other propagating greenhouses that were down near the Washington Monument. And so went the glass houses at the White House. Kind of sad.
Yeah. What plants have survived all the presidents? Since every president has put their mark on the grounds as far as plantings or designs or whatever, are there plants that have been grown over the whole time span of the White House?
Not too many. So the rose has been grown the whole time. And so it's, sort of positive proof that Americans love roses. Ronald Reagan made it official that the rose is the official flower of the United States. The American holly, so Ilex opaca, the horse chestnut, surprisingly, because sometimes they struggle. And then I think a half dozen different native trees, things like maples and tulip poplars, beeches, elm, I think redbud. Oh, and maybe the American ash.
And certainly no coast redwoods.
No coast redwood. I'm sorry. I was born in California, too.
All right. It's a wonderful book. I recommend it highly. It's by Marta McDowell. The name of the book, All the President's Gardens, Madison's Cabbages to Kennedy's Roses, How the White House Grounds Have Grown with America. You could probably just ask for it as All the President's Gardens, and you would find that. Marta McDowell, thanks for spending a few minutes with us.
Thank you, Fred. It was a pleasure.
The Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast has a lot of information posted at each episode in the show notes. Maybe you'd rather read it than listen to it. That's not a problem. We have a complete transcript posted, and you can find that link in the show notes or on our new homepage, gardenbasics.net. That's where you can find that link as well as all the previous episodes of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. There you can leave a message or link up with our social media pages, including our YouTube video page. And at gardenbasics.net, click on the tab at the top of the page to read the Garden Basics Beyond Basics newsletter. Plus, in the show notes, there are links to any products or books mentioned during the show and other helpful links for even more information. Want to leave us a question? Again, check the links at gardenbasics.net. And when you click on any episode at gardenbasics.net, you're going to find a link to SpeakPipe, where you can leave us an audio question without making a phone call. Or go to them directly, speakpipe.com/gardenbasics. You want to call us? We have that number posted at gardenbasics.net. Spoiler alert, it's 916-292-8964, 916-292-8964. Email? Sure, send it along with your pictures to fred@farmerfred.com. Or again, go to gardenbasics.net to get that link. And if you send us a question, be sure to tell us where you're gardening, because as I am fond of saying, all gardening is local. Find it all at gardenbasics.net. Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Tuesday and Friday, and it's brought to you by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Garden Basics, it's available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, visit our website, gardenbasics.net, and that's where you can find out about the free Garden Basics newsletter, Beyond the Basics. And thank you so much for listening.